Snishtukum bagels today.
Oh, yeah, we don't have bagels today. Oh, how do I stop this thing? This always happens. Well, good start, Deb. How are you?
I think the answer is okay.
Are you just okay because we don't have bagels today? Is that the problem?
That's part of it. You're right. You've hit into the center of all of it.
It all has to do with bagels. So how was your Mother's Day? Was that a good time?
Oh, yeah. My firstborn, I had two, came in and we went to lunch, and he brought those flowers, the peonies in the kitchen, and we went to lunch around the corner. And it's sort of amazing to have a son who's over 50 and have to know there's so much to forget in a long life as your brain ages. That's why you develop humor, because fun will compensate. If you're funny, it compensates for what you don't remember.
Yeah, does your son help with that too? What do you talk about?
I have no memory.
It's just good to see him, and he brings you flowers, and I guess that's really all that matters.
Oh, it's pretty special, yeah.
That's fantastic. I got my mom. I get her the same gift every year. I go to Sherry's Berries. Great company. Maybe they'll sponsor us one day. Who knows? I love Sherry's Berries, but it's always weird because I get my mom this like assortment of chocolate-covered strawberries, and there's like this hint of sensuality to that gift.
Could you bring them here at
You want some?
sometime? Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
I will get you some. Maybe next time I'll get you a Mother's Day gift. And
It doesn't have to be Mother's Day. The berries sound terrific.
Well, they are expensive, but you deserve them, so I will get you them.
I'm willing to foot the bill.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, they come with like caramel pretzel rods. It's a really great package deal they have over there at Sherry's Berries. I recommend it to many people.
Is it around here?
No, it's on like, I don't know where it exists. It's in the abyss of the internet.
Oh.
It's great. You just go online, you can reorder your last year's order, and you're like, I care about you, Mom, and it's perfect.
Oh, wow. Riddled with sentiment, isn't it?
I do care. I give it to her because she loves it, so it's a good gift. You know? So, and then also, good news, I'm still dating that girl. So, I mean, it's a pretty long run for me. It's been, I think, 3.5 months now? I give Dev credit for this because she is the one who inspired me to start looking more into serious relationships. Mm-hmm. And
I don't know how I did it, but it's really amazing.
Yeah.
I know how you did it. You asked me about my single life. I told you my stories, and you go, so you're just doodling around? And I was like, oh, God, maybe you're right. Maybe that's what I'm doing. So it's going well, and I'm meeting her friends on Wednesday, so I feel like it's a big step.
Sure.
So we'll see how that goes. Oh. Yeah. So I don't know if she'll listen to this podcast. Like, you didn't say we were dating.
Wow. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk yet. That's why I'm not.
No, you are allowed to talk.
Okay.
And I think
I thought this was like quiet time, and you guys and I just react.
God damn it, Corinne! You should know your place. Sit in your seat and wait for your turn.
I really try to know my place when it's not my podcast.
You do very well. Well, I'll introduce you. I'll give you an official introduction,
Perfect.
and then the floor is open. We are very happy to have you here today. For those of you who don't know, Corinne Fisher is a highly accomplished stand-up comedian, writer, and actor based here in New York. From one-woman shows to stand-up to creating and co-hosting one of the most successful comedy podcasts on iTunes today, Corinne is also part of a comedy duo along with Christina Hutchinson, and together they've created the comedy brand Sorry About Last Night. We're not done. In 2013, Christina and Corinne launched Guys We Fucked, the anti-slut-shaming podcast, which is a weekly podcast where men they've slept with are interviewed. Also, other people in the sex industry and all sorts of interesting people, comedians, porn stars. The show and the podcast encourages dialogue and awareness for developing and maintaining a sex-positive attitude among their worldwide fan base. The podcast consistently remains in the top 5 comedy podcasts on iTunes. Corinne and Christine have also taken their show on the road, which is called the Guys We Fucked Live Experience, which I've been to one of your shows, and they are incredibly amazing, super well thought out. And they perform in front of large audiences all around the world, and we're even at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal. We're grateful she's here. Very excited for Corinne Fisher.
Wow, thank you. I love sitting quietly as someone reads a bio about me.
Everyone loves the... Well, we know comedians
I'm
are...
like, ah!
And we like to make them extra long, so you really have to sit in that process.
It's funny because it's uncomfortable. By the end, I was like, and also I wrote a book, so.
Oh, damn it! We always forget.
The narcissism does come into play. You're like, okay.
Well, I feel comfortable. It's an interesting balance with comics, because we're so hard on ourselves and hate hearing that, but at the same time, it's all we really want. So.
Yeah. I'm not that hard on myself. Well, I don't know. I don't hate myself. I am hard on myself, though.
Yeah.
That's the difference between. Yeah, you seem like you came from a nice family, though. I can't say that for most comics, but that's luck of the draw.
And it's weird. So. Sometimes I'm like, why is my family so nice? I feel like.
I have a joke about it. No one cares about you if your parents are still married. Like, no one's interested in hearing your jokes.
Yeah, well, they're not still married. They are divorced.
Okay, well, that's good.
I got something. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
There you go.
You gave me some comedic credibility.
There you go. Mine are still married, so wah.
Oh, so you're the one nobody cares about.
Yeah.
Well, we're very excited to have you here, like I said, and basically I just kind of want to hear about your journey.
My journey.
Everyone's got a unique journey. How'd you end up here right now?
Are we talking like career journey, life journey? Like what part of the journey?
Well, let's start. Yeah, I mean more like career and how you got into comedy, because like you're from New Jersey. Mm-hmm. What was your childhood like? Were you like one of the funny ones of your friends or in the family?
Yeah, I was like, my childhood's not super interesting to talk about because it did go well. So like no one wants to waste podcast airtime on that. No one wants to hear about like my turtle sandbox and my log cabin in my backyard. Like no one's interested. It's very boring. But yeah, I mean, I would say strange, but not in a weird way where no one would speak to me. Like I wasn't like a kid no one talked to, and like I didn't like pick my boogers or anything. I was liked, but also hated. Like that's kind of how my life always is. Like you either love me or you hate me. There's really no in between, and it's been like that since I was a little kid. And I did a lot of theater. I wasn't always the funniest one, but I mean I remember as early as I would say kindergarten, doing like a prank anytime the teacher would leave the room. Like my prank when I was in kindergarten was I was wearing like a bandeau top, and then she left the room and I like flashed the class. But like when you're in kindergarten, there's nothing to flash. But it still was funny to everyone. So I liked that. I just love making people laugh. My dad, he owns a baseball card store in New Jersey, and
that is amazing.
Yeah, so he would always come home and tell us these fantastic anecdotes, and I think that inspired me to make people laugh because I felt so good when I was laughing at his stories. Like it was the most joy I felt. And it wasn't like sad or anything. It was just so fun to laugh, and I loved the way he told the stories. So I mean, I've been doing theater and theater camps and stuff like that since I was like 6. I was consistently trying to be famous, like shamelessly. Like I would put on gowns and like just walk up and down the street like in my suburban town, just hoping like a casting director would be driving down the street.
The way it happens.
Well, because you hear stories every now and again, like Natalie Portman was discovered in a pizza parlor, and I was like, this could be me. I got to be ready at any moment. Any audition that was available that I heard about, like taking photos of myself, making little videos, doing plays in the backyard, like anything I could think of that someone might want to put me in a movie or a play, I would do all the time. And then, I moved to New York City when I was 17, and I went to the School of Visual Arts. I have a degree in directing. From there, it's a real 4-year school. People are like, what's that? And it's a BFA. It's a real school.
What does that stand for?
School of Visual Arts.
But arts.
It's not like part of NYU or anything. It's its own art school. And then I just stayed, and I've been here for 16 years, and I've done the Upright Citizens Brigade program. I put together a 1-woman show. I did a 2-person show that was based on my best friend and I getting hired then fired from a reality TV show, which at the time was traumatic for me. I drank a whole bottle of Chateau Diana, which is a cooking wine. And
but what does it mean? A lower alcohol or higher
like
alcohol?
It's like cooking wine is just like the cheapest. You're like not meant to drink
just
it
to give it that
in a
light.
glass. You're meant to put it in like a pasta in a frying pan. But I like bought it because it was $6, and I was like, I'm so depressed. Like this is my only chance to be on this weird reality show on the Sundance Network.
This is your childhood moment coming to fruition.
Yeah, and then I was just like, well, I blew it. So I got drunk on Chateau Diana, but it was okay. Like, funnily enough, though, Rosebud Baker ended up on that show. Like, I was hired on it, but then fired because I wouldn't, like, fake all these things. Like, I wouldn't fake going to rehab or like being in love with my gay best friend, so they fired us, and I believe Rosebud Baker took my place.
I was like, well, I'll take that. Why wouldn't you fake it?
She's another comedian, because that's ridiculous. Like,
because you're having to act like a real person.
Well, I mean,
it's like not acting. It's
no, it had nothing to do with like acting. It just had to do with like I am not in love with my gay best friend, and I think that if you have an openly gay best friend and you're in love with him, like you're not living in reality. Like I don't get crushes on people that they don't even want to put their penis inside me. Like, why would I? It just makes no sense. It's like that's like, to me, reeks of like self-hatred or it doesn't. I wouldn't do that on national TV. It's just not true. I don't want to ruin my friendship and make my friendship weird. And my best friend didn't want to go to rehab because that stays on your record forever. So he didn't want that. He's a therapist. Like, he couldn't do that.
It says a lot about you though that you turned down an opportunity because you knew it didn't.
I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to just do anything, and it's not even an issue of pride. Like, I mean, I fell up the stairs getting Conan O'Brien sun chips. Like, the pride is not an issue. It's like, but it's just like I always like to be who I actually am if I am being myself on a show or a podcast.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to live your life. Deb, are you always who you are?
I was just listening to that. It seems unfeasible.
To be who you are,
to feel good about who you are. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's honestly, I don't really think that I'm super talented in anything except for being myself. Like, any success I've had, I can attribute to being really good at being myself. I don't have any real talent other than that.
But that is a talent. It's like amazing. I saw it was like a sign on the wall. You know how like you just walk by New York and see really cool stuff? Mm-hmm. And it was like being courageous in this day and age is like loving yourself. Mm-hmm. Basically, like, you're just being yourself and feeling comfortable. So it's like, while it shouldn't be a skill, it kind of is a skill.
Oh yeah, and I've been walking around the planet. Until I started the Guys We Fuck podcast with Christina, I had no clue that most people don't like themselves. So here I am walking around the planet thinking everyone thinks the way I do, which is like, this is great. I love being me. This is fun walking around. And like, I'm not even a glass half full person. I'm sad a lot, but as far as like feeling comfortable in my own skin, I really always have. And then when I figured out that most people don't, I was like, oh my God, this makes much more sense. Why things go down the way they do, or why you get in fights with people, or when people talk to me a lot, it feels like they're speaking an alien language to me. Like, I don't relate to a lot of other people, and I don't feel like I am relatable in a lot of ways, and that to me is the link.
That made you relatable.
Yeah, people will be telling these stories where they're like, oh, and then I spent 3 years thinking about what this person thought of me, and I was like, what are you talking about? I don't think of what someone thinks of me like when I walk out the room. I'm not thinking of it. Like, it's just never crossing my mind. I mean, yeah, not even when I'm on a date. Like, if you don't like me, that's fine.
It's like, what are you going to do? You can't force something to happen just because your like fairy tale is painting it a different way.
Right. As long as I'm doing things, like, as long as I feel proud of my actions or comfortable, and I go to sleep at night being like, okay, I lived this day like the way I want to live it, and being the person who I want to be, I don't care what anyone else thought of it, And that doesn't mean like not being considerate of other people's feelings. Absolutely, I try to do that.
It's just not sweating the stuff that you can't.
Yeah,
it's not
who
worrying
cares?
About it. Yeah.
And also, like, if everyone liked me, that would set off an alarm.
Yeah, you have to. If you're not alienating people to some degree, which just sounds weird. Like,
no,
you're kind of not being authentic. You're just.
Yeah, and I feel that way about comedians too. Like, if you're constantly killing in every room you go into, you must have really generic jokes.
Yeah, just like Tinder, huh?
Yeah. Anytime I see someone crushing all the time, I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible.
Yeah, you need those gut checks to like remind yourself to dig deeper too. Mm-hmm. It's like those people will survive for a little while, but if you really want to keep evolving, you have to kind of constantly.
Yeah, it's like Woody Allen. Like, I know he's problematic, as the kids say, but as a director, I really love Woody Allen, and he consistently would put out like a great movie and then a terrible movie, but I like that because it's like he's taking risks, trying something new, and anytime Brene Brown says this on her Netflix, and I don't love self-help, but I do love Brene Brown. And she was like, if you can either live comfortably or courageously, and if you live courageously, you are going to fail. So it's like, if you take risks, you're going to fail. It's not like you might fail, you are going to fail. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's just, a good thing to remind yourself of.
Yeah, once you accept it, and it's like,
right.
It's all for a better, greater purpose.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with either. Living comfortably is totally fine. It's just what you want to do with your life.
Yeah, for me, it's like a balance. It's like, because I am very much like that, but at times you're just like, you have to dial things back.
You can't live courageously all the time.
Yeah,
no one has that.
That's called dumb risk taking, or blind risk taking,
or just like kind of like almost like manic behavior all the time, like always thrill seeking. Like that's not necessary.
Yeah, it's a reserve, and you build it up, and you need it, and it's like patience. You didn't like. When were you doing stand up? Because you weren't doing that early on. Were you more in like production early on?
Production? Oh, you mean like film production?
Yeah, like what were you doing right out of college?
So right out of college, I got a job at a talent management company in New York called Liebman Entertainment. So they manage actors in film, television, TV. Most notable client, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who
heard of him.
You guys know. And I worked there for 5 years. At the time, like when I was in college, Entourage was really popular, and I fancied myself like a young Ari because I thought it was a good job because I love the entertainment business, and I'm pretty bossy and also pretty organized for an artist, which most artists aren't. Like I can hold a regular job just fine.
Yeah.
So I thought it might be a good career choice for me. Because you can't just go right into directing unless you're from a rich family. It's just not going to happen. I worked there for 5 years, and I learned a ton. But like basically end of day one, I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. But then 5 years later, I was still there. But over the course of those 5 years, I had started frequenting the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, taking classes there, and really getting invested in the comedy scene. So much so that the other managers who worked there wanted me to start a comedy division. And so I signed 2 clients, including, and they're both doing well. I actually still track their careers.
Oh, whoa.
So I'm proud of myself. One is Nate Dern, who went on to become the artistic director of Upright Citizens Brigade, wrote a book, I think wrote a movie. He was also on that show, Beauty and the Geek.
Oh, yeah, I heard of it.
And then Jocelyn DeBoer, who's really killing it right now directing. She did a short film with another woman, and it's been kind of doing the festival circuit, and it's doing really well. So I'm very proud of her from afar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool to actually be on the management side that early. And then
Yeah.
So you were like taking the classes, and like, I'm assuming you had a good experience at UCB?
I mean, good. I mean, I liked what I learned. I think the environment is very cult-like.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I've said that many times before, it's not a secret. It's not for me, but also I'm not an improviser. Like, an improviser is someone who's very much a team player, very much wants to work as a group. And like right away, I'm like, I need to work by myself because like your commitment, the speed at which you do things is not working for me.
Yeah, it's like I remember doing the same thing, and it was like we have a group meeting, and it was like
Yeah.
it felt like I was working with a bunch of kids, and like half of them didn't know and I was like, is this really the best use of my time?
Yeah, it's also a lot of silliness, and like my humor like is not very.
It's much.
I don't
more
like being
serious.
silly. I like
that
being
makes sense.
cunty. So yeah, that's more what I think is.
Yeah,
funny.
I will say though, I do think as Michael Hardney has taken over and it's changed, I have gone over there recently, and I feel like they're doing a really good job. Recently, I'm like curious of like.
Oh, I didn't know he was the new. Okay, that's
yeah,
great.
and it just seems like they're really cultivating like a more helpful community than that kind of like alienate and block people out. So it's kind of
it was really cutthroat. It was like all the people who got made fun of and alienated in high school got together and then decided to do that to other people. And you're like, well, this seems counterproductive.
Yeah.
You
Finally,
know?
I have a little bit of power and control.
Yeah, very strange, very strange. But I was like also dating someone at the time who was higher up and was a teacher there and on all the Harold and Maude teams. So I became kind of invested, but I was more like a fan of his after I got to know him. I didn't know him before, just because he was also just so much better at improv. I think there's a shelf life for me in improv. Whereas as soon as I tried stand up, I was like, this is something I feel like I could be really good at. And improv, I think I could only be okay at or good at.
Yeah. So you started with improv, and then that led to stand up.
I did improv first, and then I did a one-woman show, and then I was in the storytelling circuit a lot, like the kind of like Moth, Risk people, and then from there I went into stand up, because basically someone told me after a show, they were like, you need to try stand up. And I had always loved it, and I was like, okay. I didn't even really know it was a thing you could just try
to do. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I thought when like 5 people got to do stand up, and we've already picked them, and they're already on HBO. Like, I didn't know
100%
about open mic. Like, that was not a thing.
Which is why when you explain to people like you do stand up comedy, like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
It kind of seemed like this thing that only a couple people get to do, and it's like this wild life, and that's how I always thought of it as well. Because I had always watched it all the time. I loved it. But I was just never even, I don't know.
Yeah. What was that one woman show? Was I Stalk You? Is that what was that about?
It was about stalking people. I mean, my family has a history of stalking people. Not in a scary way, in like a fun way, like celebrity stalking. It sounds creepy when you say it.
Not when you do a little of this when you say it.
But yeah, well, I mean, this is a place where like being an okay enough looking woman does come. It's like a privilege that people don't get scared. Men don't get scared of you. So, but yeah, I mean,
that could be like an album title. Okay enough looking.
Yeah. Well, I always call myself comedian pretty, which is, like for a comedian, I'm like a fucking knockout.
Yeah,
but like in the real world, you're like, you're a 7. It's fine. And I'm so comfortable with that. Like, I don't mind at all. But yeah, and so like my grandmother, we're all like a family like that's obsessed with celebrity, which is funny to me that I'm the first one or like to try to pursue a career in the arts. But again, like different generations, like they weren't trying to fuck around and do entertainment stuff. They were trying to like do things that made money right away. So
this takes time.
Like my mom was a real estate agent and then a teacher, so currently a teacher, but
yeah. So you met Christina at, where did you meet her, at that old job?
At the old job, Lieben Entertainment. Yeah, she's 2.5 years younger than me, so she was our intern, and she interned for us 2 days a week, I think, but one of the days was Friday, and Fridays in management are terrible because you have to wait for Los Angeles managers and agents to finish up and send you auditions and stuff. And they really take their sweet ass time. So basically, I was like 22 years old, and I would be in my office every Friday till 11 p.m., just pile down and work. I would be the only one there. All the lights would be off except for on my desk. And I would just like be crying because like I had already worked, a 60-hour week for like $24,000. I couldn't pay any of my bills. I was starving. I was exhausted, and then on top of that I couldn't even like meet my friends on a Friday to have a drink because I was there until 11 or 12 at night. And Christina worked on Fridays, and like she really helped me to get through some of that volume, so I always had like a special place in my heart for her because it was rough.
If it wasn't for you, I was like, you were hitting rock bottom.
Like it was already rough, so she helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a good worker.
And how long did that take to form? Like, were you like, hey, let's like...
I mean, we didn't do it while she was interning, but shortly after she left, we stayed friendly because like I only had 2 other people working there, and they were like adult men with adult lives, and I was still kind of like that out of college. And so the interns to me were like the people that I hung out with more so because we had more similar lives.
Yeah,
I was just out of college. And so we stayed friends on Facebook, and one day she just messaged me, and she was doing like a bringer show at Broadway Comedy Club, and she was like, hey, do you want to come? I need to get like 10 people to come see me. Do you want to? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds really fun. I'd love to see you do stand-up comedy. And I saw her do it, and I just felt like this is someone who has talent. Like I could see this really working out. I had been already thinking about really trying stand-up, had already done some shows, and and so I asked her if she wanted to work together, because at that time it was, number one, I was reading a book called How to Steal Like an Artist, which suggested having an A project and a B project. So my A project was going to be stand-up and like my own comedy, and the B project could be the comedy duo. And people like Garfunkel and Oates were really hot at that time. So it was just seemed like a good time to like pair up with another female comedian. And also she's pretty. So I was already thinking from a manager standpoint already.
Yeah, that was really, I never even thought about that, having that experience going ahead of time.
Yeah, so you wanted like, it's like pretty is gonna be a faster sell than not pretty when you're a woman. It just is. So I made that choice, and it was never a secret. I told her right to her face. So and she was fine with it. No one's ever been like, using me because I'm pretty.
Yeah, it's like, say that one more time.
Right, it's fine.
Yeah, it's a compliment.
It's not like you're pretty and talented. Like you can't be. You have to be both.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that you like left improv because you were like, I got to do this on my own. I don't like this team, but then you kind of found like someone who had like a similar.
Oh, I love working one-on-one with people. One-on-one is great because to me that's like there's just a lot more value in that relationship. You can really get to know someone one-on-one. When it's a group, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors there, people putting up facades, and I just don't have any patience for that. And plus, stand-up comedians are very different than improvisers. We are ourselves to a fault, whereas improvisers are constantly doing characters to hide whatever pain they have, and I don't like voices. So I really hate when people do voices.
But you did didn't you do voiceover work before? You're just like, I do my own voice.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, because it's as if they want someone who sounds like they're from New Jersey. Or I could do a British accent, that doesn't bother me. But like, when people speak in voices in everyday life, it's truly one of my worst nightmares come to life. Yeah.
Deb, you got any voices up your sleeve?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Like silly voices, like people who will just be like, "Hey, this is like a wild time we're having," out of nowhere for no reason.
Yeah, like that stereotypical like Valley Girl kind of talk, like we're girls.
Just an accent.
Yeah, it's like a thing or.
Totally unknown to me.
Well, I'm glad. You know what?
You have a good group of friends.
Yeah, you have great friends, and you should keep them. Because it sounds nice to live in that world.
So what were your early years in stand-up like? Did you find it hard as a woman to break into the scene? Did you find it male-dominated, or did you and Christina had each other's backs from day one?
We did have each other's backs, and that was part of the plan. Like, because open mics are super intimidating. Not because you're a woman, just because comics are fucking mean.
Yeah, like if
they're
you're not
really
funny,
mean people. Yeah. And because a lot of them don't like themselves, and they take it out on you. And they try not to laugh at your jokes. Like, they will sit there and try to not laugh, even if something's funny. And they won't pay attention to you. And they'll roast you for no reason. And that's not even appropriate if you don't know someone and you're not at a roast. But it wasn't like it wasn't really like, people always ask me like, oh, was it different as a woman? In my honest experience, not really. It had nothing really to do with being a woman for me. But I'm also I have a pretty male energy, so I think I don't notice it as much as other people. And then secondly, like my whole life I've been in male-dominated things. Like I had just gone through 4 years of college where I was a director, so I was working with mostly men there. And then I went on to a talent management company where the only other women were the interns. So I was like smoking cigars with other managers again. So like that's very male. So it was always fine for me. I mean, like, yeah, people hit on you sometimes, but like that happens when you're a woman anywhere at any time for your whole life.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be comedy. It's just the fact that you're kind of putting yourself in a situation with like some very horny alone people, especially in those early stages, those open mic scenes.
Yeah, I just don't have like, my mom used to call, like my mom said, I'm like there's a story called Ransom of Red Chief where basically this kid gets kidnapped and he's so annoying that the kidnappers return him. And my mom always used to say that story reminded her of me. So no one really messes with me. It's not really a thing.
It's good.
I don't really have to worry about it. Yeah. It's like very Jersey. It's like these like punk ass comedians. And also like I didn't get made fun of in high school, so I was already going in ahead of the game. Like I just didn't have that trauma.
The trauma was.
I wasn't like, I'm doing this open mic to get back at everyone who ever called me a dork, and there is so much of that. I just like making people laugh, and I like jokes, and I think life is a lot better when you make fun of things. And like that's truly the only reason I'm in comedy. Like I liked when my dad told me funny stories. Like there's not a deep reason. I just love comedy. comedy.
I think that's a much healthier reason to be in comedy, and hopefully audiences appreciate that.
You would hope, but I always kind of feel like, I feel like I don't fit in because, not that I want to fit in to comedy, but
There's that instinct though of wanting.
yeah, it
belonging.
feels like almost like you don't like I didn't experience enough trauma to deserve to be here. But then there are a couple of comedians, like namely Kathy Griffin and Jerry Seinfeld, who kind of the same thing. Even Sarah Silverman, actually, they just like comedy, and there's not more than that to it, and that's nice to find stories like that. Because when you when Jerry Seinfeld's interviewed about it, and he's like, "No, I had a great life. I just like comedy."
Yeah. I'm so sick of
There you
everyone
go.
thinking like you all have to be depressed, and
Right.
it's like don't put everyone in that box. Like it happens. But
Well, it's like this very like the allure of being this like depressed artist. And there's a great TED talk that the author of Eat, Pray, Love did, kind of just about that. Like you don't need to be tortured, you don't need to be depressed, you don't need to be medicated to create good art. You can have a stable life and still create. So if like you are stopping yourself from getting mental health help because you think it's going to ruin your art, that's a bad reason. I mean, it's always a bad reason.
yeah,
not to
that's
get
a
help.
horrible. Yeah,
But,
I
like,
would be miserable.
So many
I can-
people lean into that though. Like I even had someone I was dating who like refused to go on medication for ADHD because he was afraid it would affect his comedy, and instead it just affected our relationship to the point where like he was like leaving faucets running, leaving the door open. I have a dog. Like what? Like
Yeah, that's
that
not.
you can't function in an environment like that. It's too stressful and dangerous.
Yeah, no, well, actually, and I don't want to go too far off into this tangent, but I've been reading this book, The Artist Way, and it's all about kind of
yeah.
like nurturing that inner child. And I got it from Gary Goldman's tips on Twitter because
I've been writing those down.
they're
yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm almost just like, I bet you wish you had this when you were at this age or young in comedy. So
Yeah.
it's so nice. But that book is all about like being nice to yourself and getting rid of those old wounds and actually realizing like you can have fun and be creative, and it doesn't have to be this negative beat your creativity till it gives you what you want.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because so many things, especially like I'm like a huge Alanis Morissette fan, and you know
Who isn't?
Who you're a fan of?
Alanis Morissette. She's a
Haven't
Canadian singer-songwriter. Do you know anything?
No,
She had,
the name is vaguely familiar, but nothing comes. To,
yeah, she had in 1995 her album Jagged Little Pill came out, and she like her hit song was "You Oughta Know." I don't want to sing it to you because it's a little
You oughta know.
graphic, but yeah.
Well, I thought Ironic
A lot of angry
was
chick
Ironic
music, I
on
love
that
it.
album.
Ironic was on that.
Which was her
album.
first big hit? We really need to deep dive into Alanis Morissette's career.
I actually can't tell you the first single, but I mean like the song that broke her is "You Oughta Know," which is famously about Dave Coulier from Full House. Or maybe not famously by the look on your face.
I didn't know, but you learn something
Fun
every day.
facts.
Dev and I are both being enlightened. right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, and so she's like all, you know, her albums when she's in pain are so wonderful, and then, you know, when she's happy and has a kid, it's not great. So, I mean, I gotta say the music is not great.
It goes downhill.
Yeah. But the same thing happens, like, even with Seinfeld, like, when he had a kid and started doing, like, baby jokes, you're like,
It's like, no, go back to pointing out the stuff that matters to us.
Yeah.
Not to you.
So it's hard, but I try to have an open mind. But it's possible. Like, Ali Wong did a great job of still keeping it fun. So,
Yeah.
you can do it.
She's an epitome of timing and
Yeah.
she nailed everything. Just kind of came together.
And Burt Kreischer has kids, and he, you know, is great at talking about them in a funny way.
And he like
so.
even uses them on his social media to like be
Yeah,
funny.
I worry about. I met one of his kids not too long ago, and I checked in on her. She looked like she was doing okay. So I was like, oh no, like, are you okay getting made fun of all the time?
Yeah, she seems cool, but you never really know. I guess.
Yeah,
at the
I
end
just
of the
like I was looked around in her bedroom, and I was like, okay, this looks like a normal like kid's bedroom. This is fine. They're cool though. They're a really cool family.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So you and Christine are friends. You've been doing stand-up for a while. When did you like decide to make a Sorry About Last Night brand?
I mean, that was kind of immediately. We were friends always, but there was basically like not any time when we were just friends. We were always linked in a business way because it started with a business relationship. So and then as soon as I saw her do the stand-up, I basically messaged her like the next day, and it was all within a short period of time, like around 2010. So that was really fast. Mm-hmm. I don't like a lot of dilly-dallying.
Yeah. It's like if you either know it's gonna work. Is you the same way in relationships?
No, that I'll stay in tortured for a while. I'll take a little time in those.
But with your career, you know where you want to go, and no one else is
Yeah.
getting in your way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, I don't know if I skipped a step, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, because you developed like Gina Sprinkles. And that character just I thought was funny. Was that like all
Thank
your
you.
idea, and was that just kind of like a let's just create something and see what happens?
Yeah, I think I just have a lot of creative friends, and like because I my friends know I hate hanging out just for pleasure, which is something I've been working on, like having fun, because I'm really bad at it. But so instead of just like hanging out, we would make videos, because I'm like, okay, well, this is productive, but also like a little bit more laid back. So like, vloggers had just kind of emerged at that time, and I was watching like Jenna Marbles, and then my friend Grace Helbig was doing Daily Grace at the time, who, you know, and both of those people are now very, very famous. And I just thought vlogging was so funny, the concept of jump cutting and doing all these weird voices that I find annoying. And just to me, it was like this fast paced, and like coming from someone who had just studied directing, it was like all the wrong things you were doing. And I loved it. It was so manic. So yeah, I created this character. I think I feel like I might have originally created the character for a mod audition at UCB. And then it went over well in the room. Ultimately, I didn't get the gig, but I loved the character so much. And even my boyfriend
what's the
at the
premise
time,
behind that character? Like, how would you define them?
just a manic vlogger, she's just a
like,
kind a parody of she's just a parody of a vlogger. And yeah, and it's also fun because like she can say much more messed up things than you can say yourself.
Yeah, it's a character.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's not like I share the thoughts of her. She's a maniac. And I had a friend who loved editing and kind of inserting weird cartoon things to that. And so we just did that together, and we really loved it. And it was weird, but in a good way. And so we just kept doing them over the years. And I still post them now, but that's like a 7-year-old character.
Yeah, it's just you still do like create new ones?
I've done one maybe as like 3 years ago is the last time I did one, I think, because the guy who was directing them moved to Chicago, but I was in Chicago for a gig, so like I did one with him for old time's sake. But yeah, I created a new vlogger character. I only do vlogging characters because
I'm
fascinated with them. But yeah, I just created another one named Sophie, who's like very like pretends to be like a PC social justice warrior, but really is just in it for her own
building her own following.
Yeah, her own following, and to highlight herself.
I feel like there's quite a few people who do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not based on nothing.
Yeah. Has to be based on reality. So again, you formed Sorry About Last Night, and then you started like running a show. Were you guys running like a monthly?
Yeah, there's so much stuff that we did. I mean, we had a monthly show at Gotham City Improv that was like BYOB and very laid back, and all our friends would come to it because that's in the early stages of comedy. Your friends still want to see you perform, and then about 2 years in, they're like, no, thank you.
That's exactly the cutoff. It's maybe 2.5 years.
No, thank you. I'm going to pass. They've seen all your jokes and they're tired of them, and they don't find you nearly as charming as you find yourself. And then we moved on from there. We did a show at Brooklyn Winery in Williamsburg, where I was living. So we just kept doing shows, and we had a lot of like local success. We were able to, pack a room for 50 to 100 people, which is pretty hard to do when you don't have a larger platform. So
yeah, how are you doing that? How are you getting people in?
I mean, I think it was like we had a good amount of friends to begin with, and I think then they told people or brought people, and the shows were of a high enough quality consistently that people came back. And then we did things like we would stay out in Flyer, Williamsburg, make videos. We had like a little bit of an online following, and I mean, when I say little, like 1,000 people. But when you're absolutely no one, 1,000 people on Twitter isn't bad. There's plenty of accounts with like 52 people. And so we just kept doing it from there, and word got around. Yeah, that it was a good show, which still happens to this day. Like if a show is good, people in New York are very willing to go out and see a good live show, especially one that's like $5-10.
Yeah, because you're comparing it to a club where you got a 2-drink minimum, you're kind of shoved in $20,
Yeah.
you're spending $60 before you even know it at a place like that.
And we were able to get like Christina had interned at SNL, so she could get people like Hannibal Buress, and like I had, through my same Gina Sprinkles friend, met Kevin Meaney because he is part of the gay scene, and like I'm friends with a bunch of gay guys, and so like we would just find these random ways to befriend people. And the great thing about comics is even if they're, I mean, unless they're like Chris Rock big, and even him, like he would probably be willing to like jump into a show unannounced. But like comedians are very accessible people throughout their careers. So we were able to get Hannibal Buress, Kevin Meaney on a Big J. Okerson. Like we were able to get pretty big people just from kind of navigating. And that's a part where being a woman probably definitely does help. It's not but it's a pro, not a con.
Totally. I mean, I did the same thing. I kind of built my show the same way as you.
Yeah.
But I noticed that same thing, that you could just reach out to people that you used to be like that.
Totally.
And you could just send a Facebook message. And they're like, yeah, sure, I'll swing by. What time? And you're like, oh my. It's like early on, it's huge for you.
Or at least, I mean, like, I remember when I saw Melissa Villasenor on America's Got Talent, and I found her on Facebook, and I messaged her, and like she wasn't in the same city, so she couldn't do it, but like she responded, and I was just like, this is great, I love this. And that's a great part about social media. Like as draining and exhausting as it is in many ways, it's also direct access to really large scale celebrities, and it's really them, especially on Twitter. So I love that.
Yeah, you can build your own following and reach out to these people.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you create your own little, system that works.
Yeah. And I still do it to this day. Like I've been tweeting back and forth with Kathy Griffin, and it's like the highlight of my life. I love her. So great.
Yeah, she's faced a lot of harsh criticism. I felt like a lot of unnecessary because she's so funny and I like her. And
Yeah. I love her so specifically because I feel like we're both people who either people love or we really rub you the wrong way. So I'm like,
you're kind of like a Twizzler.
I get it.
You really
yeah,
are.
That's
a
why I
Twizzler.
like it. Yes. But yeah, social media is great. I also got like John Cusack slid into my DMs. Like I just love it. The moments like this I live for. Like I truly love celebrity.
I just love that saying. Deb, do you know what sliding into your DMs means?
No.
It means getting into your direct messages so people can contact you.
Yeah, and usually it's like they
It's like
want
trying
to make
to
out with you,
yeah.
but you never know.
It's like an Instagram thing. Like some girl likes your picture and you're like, oh, so you're
Yeah.
interested. I'll send you this message and see what
It's
happens.
this weird millennial Gen Z language.
Yeah. Thinking that text is more meaningful than it actually
Oh
is.
God, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, if we could go into that for hours. So we're.
Do you want to?
No.
Do you need to talk about anything?
No, we don't know.
Well, I'm here.
We'll get into that part later.
Okay.
Were you developing any of the stuff you were doing in the podcast on that show, or was that strictly a comedy show, or were you and Christina kind of developing the basis for what that podcast would be?
No. The podcast was that was a very specific impetus for the podcast. We were not trying. We were actually very against starting a podcast because we thought, and this was almost 6 years ago at this point, we're like, oh, podcasting is over. It's done. Everyone has a podcast, and we had no idea what was to come.
Can you imagine if you had said no to that? Oh Jesus.
Yeah, we were just doing sketches, and we did a video series where we reviewed the show Girls from HBO called Girls on Girls, and we would just try stuff like that. We also did a show for a live show at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, so little things like that. And then I got dumped really out of nowhere by the guy from UCB who I was dating, and that was the first time I was ever dumped, and also the first relationship where I really was in love with the person in an adult way, because I had a boyfriend in college and until the year after college for 5 years, but that was my first serious boyfriend, and even though he's very meaningful to me, I left that I just outgrew that relationship, so it felt natural to leave. Whereas with this the impetus for Guys We Fucked, his name is Frankie. I've said it all over. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He kind of I had the upper hand because in most relationships one person likes another person a little bit more. So he liked me a little bit more than I liked him the whole time, even though I liked him very much. And then kind of out of nowhere, that power dynamic changed and he dumped me, and I did not see it coming. and I took it very poorly. Like, think of the worst you've ever seen someone handle a breakup, and then minus murder escalated 10 points. And
well, I know quite a few murderers.
Yeah,
so.
that's how I handled it. So, really badly. And I was like, I mean, just so depressed for like a year. I lost like 20 pounds in like 3 months. My hair was falling out. Like, my tongue was gray. Like, it was like extra. Like, it was so bad.
How does your tongue get gray? How does
malnourishment.
Just nothing.
I was I was eating like, maybe I would eat like a McDonald's ham. I had no taste for any food. And the only food I could stomach was fast food for some reason. So it's like you're barely eating, and then
you're losing weight while you're eating. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, because
it's not like a good type of weight loss.
Especially
like
when you're young, it's like it's really caloric intake. So it's like you can eat McNuggets every day, but you're also just not getting the nutrients that you need.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was very bad. But then about a year into that depression, I kind of was thinking about things, and John Cusack, and well, because he has a film where he goes back and he interviews all the people that he's ever dated, to find out like more about himself and what he's doing wrong in relationships. So I was like, that's a great, like, let's do that. And I pitched it to Christina, because she's my comedy partner at the time. I was like, I want to do a podcast called Guys We Fucked, where we interview all the guys we've ever fucked or had relationships with, because I was like, obviously I'm doing something, because I'm very much like a student. Everything, like, so something bad happened, and like, yes, I did get very sad about it, but I always approach things from like an educational way. So it's like, okay, I'm going to fix this through interviewing people and taking notes on myself and constructive criticism, and then make the adjustments. That's how I kind of handle everything. And so we did that. I mean, it took a little convincing, because that's a hard sell. But
well, that's a hard sell. But when you sell me the show, it's like, because your branding is perfect. It's like, show called Guys We Fucked. What's it about? It's about guys we fucked.
Right.
And it's like, I get it, and I want to know more, and it's interesting. So.
Yeah, and I felt very like that idea was like in the notes section of my iPhone for a couple months, and I just kept going back to it, and I felt like I wanted to do it with Christina, because you need to do it with somebody else, because it's like really scary if you just have an ex-boyfriend in a room and you're like, why didn't it work out?
God, you too, like,
Close
you and
the
just
door.
your ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, that's creepy. That's
like,
creepy.
yeah, I have one candle lit in this dark room. It's meant to be that way.
Why don't you love me, Frank? That's real weird. So yeah,
I kind of want to see you do an offshoot and do that podcast.
Yes.
Crazy in love.
Yeah. So, so then it started, and we pitched it to, at the time, Stand Up New York Labs, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, how long did you take to get like momentum going and kind of build like?
The momentum happened pretty fast. Like episode 1 got 5,000 listens like within the first weekend, which I thought
serious?
was low, and I was like, ugh, why is this only 5,000 listens? Because I have very high expectations for myself. But I mean, within a couple months, like Huffington Post had written an article about it, because exactly what you said, like, people don't think about really simple things. It's so much more than just being talented. Like, you really have to brand yourself, and because of I had come from the management world, I was really thinking, when me and Christina sat down and created Sorry About Last Night, like, we literally sat at a big table in my apartment in Brooklyn, made a list, and branded ourselves from day one, and made sure that everything that we did was under this, like, Sorry About Last Night brand, which to us was like making mistakes, drinking, partying, but also kind of reflecting on it, which is pretty loose, but it's still a brand. And everything fit under that. And that's why it was easier to garner a following, and we were doing things like mailing lists and getting that, like, following people on Twitter to get them to follow you back, like all these like really grassroots techniques we had been doing since day one, to really create something. Because I think we are both artists and we love creating art, but to neglect the business portion of it is silly if you plan on making a living. Like, to be like, oh, I'm only doing it for the art. I hear you. I love it. Yeah. That should be the primary thing. You shouldn't be doing like a commercial for tampons if you don't want to. But also, you have to think of everything as like sellable. That's even the way I think about feminism is like, the branding's all wrong. That's why people aren't on board. It's not palatable to other people. And like, I know people have such an issue with that because they're like, well, it doesn't need to be palatable. It's a movement. But it's like, yes, it does. This is America. You got to sell everything. You even have to sell yourself when you go on a date. And to think that you don't is foolish.
Yeah, it's like, like this product is great, but you can't just yell at people to buy it. You have to like figure out a way that it clicks for them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we wanted to do with Guys We Fuck, because it's Guys We Fucked, the anti-slut shaming podcast. So we also wanted to, kind of rebrand and resell anti-slut shaming and feminism in a way that was not just for, hardcore feminists. And I'm like a pretty hardcore feminist, but I just go about it differently, I think. I'm not like, let's kill every man. Like, I certainly have thought that, but you can't say that out loud because it scares people. No one likes that.
You have to know the audience you're trying to convert, and you can't do that with just sheer willpower. You have to kind of subtly tap into it. Yeah,
and as much as we wanted to say that you need the help in any kind of movement. You need the help of people who aren't part of the minority who is like being victimized. Like, you need the help. We need the help of men.
Yeah, 100%.
That's an example of the minority being victimized.
Well, I mean, like women. Like, so we can't just do it as women is my point. Like, and people think that you can. I'm like, that's half the population. That are we just gonna be like do a sex-based civil war? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's like
it's not. Yeah, it just doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. So that's that.
Yeah, it takes time. And just speaking from my own experience, I remember, I was in a Southern fraternity. Came from that like misogynistic type of environment.
That's so funny because you do not have those vibes at all.
I know, but that was like totally my childhood. Was like I related to Southern stuff. And again, I never looked at myself as like a douchebag or an open misogynist. But I like one time wrote an article called "Cat Calls a Compliment." It was horrible.
Oh, I love this.
And I had like I was writing for this college website and getting a lot of followers, and I noticed they were all dudes. Like, dude, this is hilarious. And then I like went on a Tinder date, and this girl was like, "I don't think I can date you. I read this article you wrote."
Wow, yeah.
And it shocked me. And at first, my initial instinct was like, that girl doesn't know what she's talking about. She's stupid, like whatever. And
guess someone's never gotten a compliment.
Yeah, guess she doesn't get it. What? I think you're hot, babe. Like so thoughtless, but just whatever I could stir into comedy. And then it took like a year. I was like reading books. And like, oh my God. Like, I lived with a feminist. I was reading books for once in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself.
I hear you. It's hard to get those in.
But yeah, I guess from my own, it took a long time to like kind of be like, holy shit. I used to think I was hooking up with women to notch my belt and all that. And when I think you go through your own slow conversion, you realize like, I can't just yell at some of my other friends like, you guys don't get it. It's like, some of them are taking longer to go, and I'm like, I get it. You can't just throw it at their face. Yeah,
that's good to be patient with people because, it reminds me of something I was just talking about in therapy, and it's that girl basically she took something away from you, and she actually gave you a gift in the process because her emotions affected the way you then reacted to her. That's great.
Totally, it changed my whole position.
That was fast too. Did you really like her? Was that
no? It was a girl I never met.
Oh, it was like I thought you meant like you were on the date, so you never even got to meet her.
No, it was. Oh, wow. I think one time an old girl from high school messaged me about like the articles I wrote, and she's like, "Really?" And I was like, "It's fun. It's comedy. You're taking it too seriously." Mm-hmm. And then I think when this happened, I was like, this girl really feels this way. And I just started analyzing. I think I just started thinking about it.
But it wasn't like in The Onion. It was in a regular journal.
No, it was like a college. It was called College Town Life. It was humorous college articles about. Oh. So some people might have been spinning it, but at the same time, it was kind of coming from a place of how I felt at the time.
Right, exactly.
So.
Because I'm like, if it is, there could be a hilarious article about that. I could see that really working in The Onion.
And I think it did. I was growing my following early on from those articles, but I eventually kind of stopped and reanalyzed, and then I ended up making a whole bit about feminism, and it just was important for me to learn, and I'm trying to now pass it on to my friends, but it takes longer. Mm-hmm. So I'm just again kind of like you, trying to be aware of how to
That's quite a mitzvah though, to work on it with your friends. That's very nice.
Well, it's I get text messages all the time from my friends we hired this girl and I'm done doing this and
what? We hired this girl and I'm done doing this?
She's got all these problems. I can't handle it the same way I'd handle it with a guy, and I'm sitting back there going why not?
What is it? How do you handle it with a guy? Just punch him in the face?
Yeah, I'm why can't you just say the same thing? And I think he has a fear of women, and I know he's a good guy, but there's a lot of and a lot of my friends kind of a resistance to opening up about feminism and kind of like accepting it a little more. It's more quickly just to be like, crazy bitches. And I'm like, it's hard to like, I'm not going to ruin a friendship, but I want to figure out how to,
part
enlighten
of it
them
is
the
the
way.
branding. I'm like, I think if you just make sure that they're even if they like refuse to like call themselves a feminist, if they just believe that women deserve equality, like that's really all we need to get to.
Yes.
You don't have to be like walking around with like a feminist pin and like marching in the women's march. Honestly, I'd rather have men not there, not your day.
Yeah, well, to me, it's like just like the sending the picture of like the naked girl as like a funny joke, and it's just like you guys are like 12 years old. I don't know. It just seems like
yeah. I mean, that's the kind of stuff doesn't bother me, but it
doesn't bother me.
At a
but
certain point, like if you're in your 30s, like hopefully you saw a tit in real life by now.
That's
like it's a little weird.
Yeah. Would you say was your initial instinct of doing the show more from like your own pain and like how do I share this experience with people, or do you think there was more of like a deep thought of like I can actually do something positive for the feminist movement as I create this show?
Yeah, no, it was not activist based at all. It was more like a social it was a social experiment is what I would call it, and using myself as like a lab rat. That's all it was. Or myself and Christina using ourselves as lab rats. That's what it was. And then from there, our listeners started writing us questions and asking for advice. And we just went by the Dan Savage Lovecast rules, which is what qualifies you to give advice. And the answer is if someone asks you for your opinion / advice on something. And so we just started responding and reading them on air because we're like, okay, well, if one person has this problem or issue, chances are someone else has this question. And so we should air it to everyone. And then it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, because I was interested if you like thought of yourself as sex experts or if it was more just like we're just speaking from honesty and people are connecting. So
yeah, I mean, also like sex isn't that hard, again, this is something where like so much of the hiccups with sex come from pasts filled with shame, a lot of times caused by religion and family, and then also people not recognizing their own self-worth. So it's like that's the key, like the actual like physicality of having sex ain't that hard. I could teach someone how to have sex in like 15 minutes. Like there's just only so many things you could do, and so that's not the interesting part to me. It's the making a person who feels comfortable with their body and feels comfortable with partners and feels comfortable asking for what they want. Like that's all the things that people are missing when they're not having good sex. I mean, obviously a couple people have actual physical things that will stop them from enjoying sex, but you go to see a medical doctor for that. But most times that's not the issue. Most times it's something having to do with their emotional health.
Yeah, absolutely. You came up, I thought the tagline you have is really interesting, the anti-slut shaming podcast.
That's Christina's part. The guys we fuck with my part. The anti-slut shaming was her part.
It's like a perfect 1-2 combination of 360 branding. There's no more questions that need to be asked after that.
Yeah, and like the guys we fuck part is the social experiment part. The anti-slut shaming part is more the like, how do we make this not just a show about ourselves because we're not famous, why would anyone care? So and that's still the format of the show today. Kind of the first 30 or so minutes is us talking, which has become this basically like radio reality show. And then the interview portion, which is about an hour, that's for the audience. We are just Barbara Walters in this situation, not bringing our own stuff into it too much. Of course it leaks in a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes it's part of the conversation.
Yeah.
That's all. Did you experience a lot of like slut shaming growing up, or?
I didn't so much. Christina did a lot. Christina also has a huge old rack though, so
yeah.
I gotta say, like when you're flat chested, you could wear anything. Yeah, she has really big boobs.
Deb was like, "Wait, what? What does that mean?"
Yeah, and like I think that really affects your life when you develop breasts young. Like I think it's not something that you really think of unless you have big breasts, but people already sexualize women from a young age, but especially when you have a body like that. Like I'm curvy, so I got it a little bit, but just there's nothing like a butt and thighs just don't have the same effect that boobs.
It's just right there.
They're
it's like
just
something about guys.
Something
We're just
about
like boobs.
them.
I can't take my.
Even I get distracted by them.
Yeah.
Honestly. Well, I'm also like, I thought everyone got them. Like, I didn't know that you could get like really small ones, and I was like, I'd like a refund. But I was real ticked off for a while. But it's fine. Running's much more comfortable, so it's all good. But yeah, and so that's, and I think people had kind of belittled her a lot and just kind of thought of her as like this big-titted idiot, or and like would never believe that she was like a comedian on a show. They're like, oh, you're too hot, like what are you, a stripper? And so just things like that where people think that all you have are breasts, but you also could have read a book.
Yeah.
You could have an opinion on something. And Christina actually, based on the stories that she tells me, I think was definitely a little bit more of a nerd in high school. I was like The Craft. Like, I was like,
the movie?
Yeah, that was me. So I was like,
Such a good movie.
Like I was voted most unique in a class of 620. Like that was my vibe. But she was much more like theater nerd, like getting made fun of kind of a thing. So...
Oh, that's interesting. She doesn't strike me as that now. I mean, I guess obviously that changes as you get older.
And people, and like other women would accuse her of trying to steal their boyfriends with her big titties, things like that. And so it's just like a lot of garbage that comes along with having a desirable body type, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, I feel like there's obviously a lot of body shaming, but sometimes like women are so hard on other women. Like,
oh yeah.
Why? Where does that come from?
Great question. That's the thing. Like for me, that I try to work on the most, especially these days on the podcast, is like sisterhood, because it's so bad. And I mean, even we experience it a ton. We've had talks with our listeners. Like we have a fan base of over 1 million people, and everyone's like, "Oh, you must get a lot of slut shaming from like men." No, honestly, it's not slut shaming, but it's like the most rude comments I get are from women who claim to be fans of mine. Just nasty things like that don't need to be said. Like, oh, I thought you'd be prettier than you are. Just like, why do you need to write that?
Jesus
Think
Christ.
that in your head. I told them, I was like, listen, I love a mean comment, but that you put that on Reddit. You don't put that under my photo on my own page.
I figure this won't hurt your soul at all if I just...
Yeah, like Kathy Griffin always says, I was raised right. I talk about people behind their backs. Like, what? What are we doing?
It's so true. Yeah, it's like if you need to air it out, do it. But no, you don't have to be an asshole.
There's absolutely nothing constructive that can come out of that, because it's like, my face is my face. It's not a personality trait. And what does that mean? You thought I should be prettier. Why? Because I speak confidently and I like myself. So when you hear me talking about myself like I am deserving of love, you thought I would have to be a 10? Like, what? Also, side note, like, this face for a comedian, like, you should be thankful. Like, this is a great face for a comedian. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah, what? You should
This used to be
appreciate
the one career in entertainment when you didn't have to look good.
Yeah,
and now you have
weight.
to. And it's like, what a ripoff. I'm so irritated. Like, what? So dumb.
Did you figure that out? You gotta just plug it in. Cool. That one too. Cool. I was like,
we haven't been recording this whole time.
Yeah, like, okay, perfect. Do you mind starting over? No, that was...
Just give me the flashy thing.
Yeah, no, I saw that the quarter and I was like, there's only an hour of recording time.
Oh, no.
Wait, is there only an hour recording?
No, it should be. Now that it's plugged in, it's...
Oh, no.
I meant battery life.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you, boo.
My trusty crew. Gotta love them. Okay, so... Oh... And I mean, it seems like a big message that you have in general is just, and a lot of times where maybe that hate comes from, and it's kind of similar in how comics are to other comics, where you're going to be resentful and say mean things and hate on people when you're insecure in your position.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if maybe that's where a lot of women come from, where it's like, it's coming from an insecurity, so it's like maybe if I bring her down,
Oh, of course.
it makes me just feel better.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't blame it. It's such a societal thing, and women are so valued by what we look like, and it is so reinforced time and time again that you have to be pretty. And I feel very fortunate that I came from a household where it was just I never even thought about being pretty, really. Like, it just wasn't a thing. My mom wasn't wearing makeup. She never told me to do that. I mean, like, my clothes needed to be ironed, and like I certainly was expected to look presentable, but that is much different than like looking pretty. I mean, I didn't the only time I wore makeup up until like before college, I never wore makeup except for if I was in a school play, like a twirling or a dance recital. So only times I wore wore makeup. I was just expected to like bring home A's and be a good student and do things to give back to my community in some way. Like, my mom was very big into like volunteering and stuff. So like, just get the attention of boys or wearing makeup or looking hot, just like it wasn't discussed and even kind of made fun of at times, I think, in my household. So it was just never on my radar.
I feel like that's probably liberating in a bit of a way.
Oh, it's great. I mean, again, like I just had no idea. I feel like I really was living in this like confidence bubble for a long time because I just didn't know what was going on in other people's houses, and I can't imagine like having a mom who had an eating disorder or someone who's constantly dieting, or like what effect that would have had on me as a young woman. I don't know.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have that, and people who are very close to me, and it's their parents who put all this pressure on them, and you see it not destroy them, but you see it lead to them actually having bad habits because it's like,
right.
I don't know if it's resentment or what it is, but it like that sort of like beat yourself to death into being healthy and accepted into society, like only forms negative.
Yeah.
Does the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, and it's like, I think, now we're realizing that it's more important to tell little girls that they're smart or brave or any other word than pretty. But I think also it is said a lot of times that, like, your mom and dad should say you're pretty. And, like, I can't, my dad's definitely said, oh, you look pretty over the years. I can't even remember a time when my mom said it. And I think I am better for it because, like, so it just wasn't even on my radar, And so even if I went to school and certainly noticed it more there, like the need to be attractive, but there was such a strong foundation coming from home that, like, I kind of had this idea like, oh, you guys in school, you guys just don't get it. Like, you guys are worried about all the wrong things. Like, you need to focus. Like, you can worry about being pretty later. You have to like be smart first and then worry about pretty after that.
You had a very good sense of maturity at a young age, it seems like, where other people let themselves get caught up and and you kind of just had like a more like, I can't change anything or do anything, so why would I fret about it?
I'm also like I'm the older sibling, and again, like, I just really like lucked out with a very confident, outspoken mother. And I had my bags packed for New York City since I was in like the 6th grade. So I was kind of like...
I loved a star version of you as a kid.
Yeah, I was kind of like, these kids don't get it. Like, I would just like, I wouldn't even talk to the students. I would just like talk to the teachers. I would go hang out with like my favorite teacher, Mr. Laird, at like chess club. Because I'd be like, oh, these 13-year-olds don't get it. Like, can we discuss Andy Warhol? And I did. Like, I learned he was what was that class called? It was like some kind of a cultural class, humanities, I think it was called. And so I learned about like Basquiat and Andy Warhol and Jack Kerouac. And I was like, this is what I was missing my whole life. And I just like got very into that and would always be friends with the teachers because I was like, I don't have time for this infighting and buying all these brand name clothes. I'm like, you guys are worried about the wrong things.
Yeah.
I stand by that to this day.
It served you well. It's led you to guide yourself in a much more confident direction.
Yeah, I was like, you guys don't get it. I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette after I didn't smoke. I didn't do that.
In my head, you do. That's
I was a real nerd in that kind of way. Like, I didn't touch cigarettes or alcohol until I was like in college, and I would be like, get that away from me.
I'm a queen. My body is a temple.
Well, because I had read this is an even dorkier reason. I had read a biography about Harry Houdini, who was on my list of most inspirational people, and he never drank or smoked a cigarette. And I was like, and look at what he achieved, guys. So, yep. And that's why I did it. That's the real reason.
And now we know your ultimate goal in life is to escape from a box place with your hands.
I'm a real cool kid. Yeah.
I actually found out, you told me earlier that you used to smoke cigarettes. That shocked me.
Yeah, I stopped it when I was about 50 or so. I don't know why, but I knew then it wasn't good for you, so...
Yeah, it was like everyone. I feel like because of my great aunt and stuff, they lived to like 96, and they both smoked since they were like 12 years old. Because I think it was just like a thing, right?
Did you start young?
I don't remember when I started.
You just remember that you finished, and that's all that matters. So what? Like you kind of came out of nowhere and became like. No,
I agree.
You're running a small show.
It's very funny.
And then all of a sudden you're just very quickly kind of like a staple in the podcast world and in the comedy world, like an entity in a way. Like, what was it like handling that? And what was that shift like?
it's very weird to live a life for I would say around 30, like, so 3 years ago was when it was really noticeable as far as like getting stopped on the street and stuff. So it's very weird to go through 30 years of life relatively anonymously, and then at 30, when you're like really like pretty much like who you are. Like I would say like by 25 you start to kind of like inch into like being like an adult human. And
it takes time.
Yeah, and it's just weird, it's strange, because I mean I feel no different. I'm still me. 100%.
Which is important, which is why I think you were able to continue the way.
Yeah.
Move forward.
And so sometimes like I'll forget, and then I'll be like in Marshall's and someone will be like real hard staring at me. I usually know who it is because it's usually a 22-year-old white girl, but like just a real hard stare. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, someone's going to ask me a question about my vagina in a minute. So I just got to be ready for that.
You're the TJ Maxx.
Yeah. And I'm like, I forgot what you're calling. I feel like I'm an extroverted introvert. I don't ever know the correct order.
I've described myself with that, and I don't know if it's true or real, but I feel it seems.
Yeah, because it's like I like attention. Like for the 15 minutes I'm on stage doing stand up, like do not talk. I will ask you to leave the room. But like other than that, I really don't want any attention on me, negative or I just don't want any. I don't want anyone talking to me, about me, near me.
Yeah, you do your thing, you go on, you live your life, and you just be like a human being.
I like a lot of alone time and animals. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can tell you're big because like I just remember when people are like, you're a comedian, like you sometimes were like, do you know the guys who fuck girls? And I was like, oh my god, like you guys are really taking off. It's kind of unbelievable.
It's very popular on like Tinder. Like I've taken a lot of Tinder main pics with my guy friends to get swipes.
Taken a lot of what?
Like so on Tinder, the dating app, there's a main picture. And a lot of girls in their 20s like the show that I do. So they would ask me to take pictures so that the girls would, I guess, swipe on them trying to get to me. Which seems like a weird way to start a meaningful relationship. But I say, hey, guy, do whatever you need to do.
Lure them in with whatever you got.
Yeah, sell yourself, you know? Yeah.
I should have thought of that. Damn it.
It's worked a lot. Like various people I know are like now like living with people who they met through being fans of the Guys We Fucked podcast, which is crazy. So, whatever. I was like, listen, it definitely has not helped me have more sex. It's helped me have a lot less sex. So.
Wait, why is that?
Because, I mean, I have to be wary of, especially comedians' intentions if they're trying to sleep with me. And then also, when you know that you're going to have to interview someone publicly, you're a lot choosier about who you sleep with.
Oh. Is there a rule that if you fuck them, they have to be on the podcast?
I mean, it's a rule that me and Christina made up, but we like to stick to it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's only one person who I had no interest in having on that he actually asked to be on. I go, no thanks, I don't want to see you again. So.
Just like hated him.
And yeah, I just was there, and there was nothing. It wasn't an important enough relationship in my history for me to have to see someone I didn't want to see.
Yeah,
just not necessary.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. Where was I going with this? Oh no, I know where it was. When you have that many like ex-boyfriends on the show, and you were saying you kind of did it off of the John Cusack idea. Like, did it serve that purpose? Like, did going back and kind of reliving those moments and experiencing those guys again, did that like make you think about like? Did it make you better and understand yourself a little more? No.
What it made me, I very quickly figured out that I was not doing anything wrong. I was being myself, and these people just weren't the right people for me. Like, surprisingly, no one really had anything bad to say. I mean, some people would pretend like, oh, I wasn't that attracted to you, and I'm like, that's just like a kind of a gaslighting, like low dig tactic. And it's like, also I'm like, I know it's not true. You texted me literally for 6 months to get me to sleep with you.
Yeah, it's a self-defense mechanism.
So yeah, and because I'm very open, like, and people have no problem being mean right to my face because of my personality. So I was like ready, and I honestly wish there was more like negative feedback, because those are things you can adjust. But I mean, like, it's just things I kind of talked out, and I think I've learned a lot more from talking things through with Christina than I learned from any of the guys. So for me, like my main problem is like communication. I'm not super communicative in relationships, which is not great and also super unexpected when you're the woman, because we are so often the communicators. So a lot of times it would just be like these relationships where either I was the masculine energy and the man was the female energy, which is not exactly, that's not how I want to be in a relationship, but it was laying out that way. Or it would be me and someone else who didn't communicate well, just putting up walls and walls and walls and walls.
It's like Fortnite.
Yeah. But I mean, literally, like, my biggest complaint in relationships over the years has been, like, you don't talk enough. But I talk for a living, and when I get home, the last thing I want to do is talk. I love when people talk to me. Like, I'm gonna have to take, like, a 3-hour nap after doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because this is
you
why, like,
deserve it.
Yeah, I don't talk to, like, I don't call my mom, and I didn't even realize, like, we'll text, and, like, I know she just wants to hear about me, and I don't want to talk about me. Like, if I could call her and I knew that she would just talk about herself, I would always call.
But you know it's going to be more cynical.
I hate answering the question, how are you doing? What's up? Nothing's up.
Oh, yeah.
We're all dying, you know? And like, we're like, I'll say something like that, and then everyone will be like, sorry. Like, it's just like, that's not what I want to do. I think you can learn a lot in silence. If you know someone, like, you can sit in a real comfortable silence. One of my favorite college roommates was someone who I took, like, a hour-long walk through the city with silently, and neither of us ever questioned if the other one was mad, and because we weren't. We were just comfortable in the silence.
Yeah, it's the true test. Can you be with him like that?
It's like Alanis Morissette. Why are you so petrified of silence? Here, can you handle this? So...
Which song is that from?
I think it might be You Ought to Know still. I can't go back.
Well, have you met her yet? I feel like
I met her yet? No, but I need to.
Okay, that's gonna happen at some point.
My
I said
best
we're gonna
friend
make that
did.
happen. Like Dev has a contact to Alanis Morissette.
Oh my gosh. I'll make it happen. She's been doing she does like a lot of meditation retreats. So technically if I wanted to like pay to go to Big Sur, I could. Mm-hmm. But I think I would laugh through a lot of those exercises and ruin it for others. So I probably shouldn't allow myself to do that.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds like a plan. Did you find your stand-up, because you air out a lot of your not dirty laundry, but just like your truth and honesty, a lot about sex and relationships. Was your stand-up mimicking that?
No, I tried really hard to fight against talking about sex all the time, because I was so sick of talking about sex all the time. And that's why Katie Hannigan and I created the Comedian Project, which we submitted to the Fringe Festival several years back. And it was a challenge to, in a month or so, create 20 new minutes of stand-up that did not talk about sex, dating, or relationships. Because we found ourselves like at a lot of those women-only comedy festivals, which I hate to begin with, because to me, like, it's separating. It feels like just like the Special Olympics of comedy. It's not, it's like,
you're doing it, girls.
Exactly. Like,
shut
oh
up.
my God, you told a joke. Like, I think it's demeaning.
Everyone gets approval after their set. It's like,
yeah, it's like, why do we have to separate? It's not, this is, comedy is not a test of physical strength, so there's no reason to separate it by sex. And that's my problem with it. Like, sports absolutely should, because there's an actual physicality there, but like, funny is funny. And so by separating it, I think you're already saying, well, we know you can't compete against the men, so just compete against each other. And I think that's pandering.
Yeah, 100%.
And we would be at these festivals, and woman after woman would go up and just spend this entire stage time talking about men, and to me that was so frustrating, and I had been guilty of it too, 100%, that we had fought so much harder to become comedians. Like, being a woman comedian has only been a thing, like, been like a real big thing for like 20 years maybe, like, and even in the 80s, like not a long time. And so it's like we fought for this stage time, and then we're still spending the stage time highlighting men. What are we doing?
Yeah, you're just giving them the power at that point.
Yeah, it's like there's so many other things to talk about, and there's women have so many other thoughts and feelings and a different perspective that is, I think, so much more interesting. But this is still a struggle though. I mean, because if you're bombing basically and you go to sex jokes, like, it's gonna work out. But I think the same thing is kind of true of men, but a little bit more so for women. No,
that makes sense. But I mean, I guess it's never bad to have like a backup, if you're having, but
in my opinion, at this point in my career, it's not about I I don't do jokes. I don't change like the comedian I want to be based on audience reaction. I'd rather bomb doing what I wanted to do. And that's not to say that I do not take laughs into account, or if something consistently bombs, if I realize, okay, this isn't working. But like, if I'm not going to just start doing cheaper jokes or jokes from earlier in my career to appease a crowd who does not want to use their brains or does not relate to me. Like, I feel very comfortable being unrelatable, and I'm almost 10 years into stand-up. I can bomb comfortably. Sometimes, in fact, I enjoy bombing.
Yeah.
Because, you ever been on stage and, like, you are so disgusted with the people in the audience. Like, you're just, like, so, like, ugh, I hate everything you stand for, that honestly, if you laugh at any of my jokes, I'm taking them out of my set.
Yeah.
Like,
It's more the opposite.
idea.
Like, that was the best bomb of my life.
I get real spiteful. I'll just start roasting people in the audience. Like, I mean, I find it, like, Christina always says, she's like, you're a fun person to watch bomb because you really lean in.
Yeah, well, they say, like, a hard bomb is better than, like, a soft kill any day of the week.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and there is a way to bomb and a way not to bomb. Like, you can tell the difference between a professional bomb.
Oh, yeah. Bombing out of fear and insecurity, that's, like, uncomfortable for the audience versus, like, fuck you people, I'm sticking to my viewpoints and we're just not connecting.
Yeah. And it's hard because, I mean, I do sometimes, I have to be really careful with anger because I already come off as, like, so unapproachable and mean that, like, there's a very fine line for me between, like, the audience thinking it's funny mean and then them actually, like, being scared, like, someone's yelling at them. So I have to really be careful of that because then sometimes it just gets, like, hostile.
Yeah, it's like no one needs this right now. It's not, no one's benefiting at this point, so we'll just move on.
Of course.
And especially doing a podcast where you talk a lot about sex and airing out and not being afraid to say how you feel, which I love about you, but obviously you're going to face backlash from that. Like, how do you deal with that? And
I mean, in this climate, you kind of know it's coming. A lot of times when I say something that is going to I kind of know as it's leaving my mouth. It depends. I try to, like, you want to pick your battles. I don't want to try to be like some kind of a shock comic who's always saying stuff that's going to get me in trouble. But I will say the second people started, like, thinking that we are doing something good, you get a lot more backlash, which is unfortunate because I think it then makes people not want to try to do anything good as a comedian because, if you even, do one charity event or speak out about one cause, you are then pushed into this activist category. When I hate when people describe me as an activist. I do not consider myself an activist. I am just taking an active role in society, which I think is the duty of any citizen of any place, to look out for the people, and to then, like, act like that is some kind of an occupation is preposterous, and then also is a disservice to me as a comedian because it gives me a lot less freedom in my comedy. And so people will come to my shows, and I still really try to live by comedy rules where nothing is off the table. And, like, people will, like, fans of mine will walk out of a show that when they came to see me because they're offended. And I think that's great. I want to skim those people out.
Yeah, you don't need
you gotta get it. Like, to unfollow me, please don't. This is not for you. I'd rather have less followers and not put up with that because I'm not gonna water down who I am. And, like, anytime I get nervous about sending out a tweet, I have a rule that I have to tweet it out because I can't I cannot live in fear of being taken down. I created this career myself, and if it gets taken away from me somehow, which is hard because I own it, I'll find another way. I just have to, like, at the end of the day, I have to like myself and respect myself, and I will not respect myself if I start like curating my career based on what I think the industry wants or what I think feminists want or liberals want. I gotta speak. I have to, like, use free speech and think for myself. That's, like, the most important thing to me.
But yeah, it's just interesting you brought up that point, like, you own it and you've developed your following so grassroots and so from the beginning.
Yeah.
You've really created, like, no one can really take that away from you because I feel like
Yeah.
those people will probably be there for the ride.
Oh yeah, lots of people don't like me. Netflix doesn't like me. Comedy Central doesn't like me. Bye. I don't care. I'm not trying. Like I'll take full networks cannot like me.
Yeah.
Truly, I don't. It's not. And I understand. I do not take it personally. I'm not like, oh, they have terrible taste. I get it.
Why
It's
doesn't
fine.
Comedy Central like you?
I mean, I don't know the specific reasons, but I mean, like, this is a business, like the entertainment business chooses darlings, and I'm just like not a comedy darling, and that's fine. Like the fan base of my podcast is not really, they're not really comedy fans. They're literally fans of Guys We Fucked, which is its own kind of world. And that's great. And that's fine. And so instead of trying to make myself someone I don't want to be, I just try to, and Christina does as well, we just try to encourage our listeners to become live comedy fans, which is, I think, a lot more productive, a lot better for them. I think they're going to really like it. I can't imagine, because, there's so many different comedians. I can't imagine not finding one that you're going to like, be like, oh, I love this person. This person makes my day better.
And it's like you said earlier, like when you started comedy, you thought there was like 5 comics.
Yeah.
It's like the world is changing, and now that you go on Netflix, and not that we need to give them any credit, but like a special of comedians all around the world, and it's like you have people who say they don't like comedy or don't care for it. I'm like, I just believe that's false. You don't like the idea you have of comedy, and there's someone out there that you do enjoy. So I think it's interesting for you to be able to kind of create that for yourself and for other people.
I mean, and I had last year I would say like it was like the year of my career that I enjoyed the least, and so I looked back at it and I was like, well, why? I mean, I had like some medical issues that last year, so that was like a big part of it, but also it was the one year where I felt like more than any other year I had actually kind of tried to do these industry standard things. I had tried to submit myself for these things that everyone was doing, and it was not enjoyable. It made me like, I got pissed off a lot, and then I was at this like Kurt Cobain exhibit in Seattle at the Pop Culture Museum, and I started reading a lot of things. Like he had like a kind of like, they had a newsletter for Nirvana and stuff, and like it just reminded me, you're like, oh, like the reason you're unhappy is because you're trying to do things the industry's way instead of what you've always done, and the thing that you've really experience success in, which is creating your own things. Like and I think I was just so tired from creating Guys We Fucked with Christina, and like just, it was just so.
I still look forward to it, but that's okay because I'm part of the audience that doesn't.
You're gonna be her new most avid fan.
Yeah, I was like so tired. I think that I just wanted, like, I was like, oh, I kind of was just really yearning for someone to throw me a bone and just like put me into something that was already created, and then I was like, but that's not who I am, and that's okay,
Yeah.
And that just reminded me of that, because I was like, Kurt Cobain was kind of like the music version of who I want to be as a comedian. Like, just create your own stuff, grassroots, interact directly with fans, which is also something, to Dane Cook's credit, that he was always doing, and people like to shit on him, but he was one of the first people to really be like, hey, MySpace, IMs, like, this is something where you can, like, social media, you can really have this one-on-one really special interaction with your fan base, which can suck, but it also creates bonds that are so much stronger than going through this industry bubble.
It's a real human connection, and when you go back to that city, that person will bring friends, and you're really growing your fan base through authentic relationships.
and there's fans and listeners. I don't even like calling them fans, but I'm like, there's listeners who that I know that come to every show. In depending on cities, there's listeners who I'm email pen pals with, and it's just like, you really have these people who you think about a lot, like it's like kind of like characters in a TV show, like Orange is the New Black. Like, I have maybe like 12 people who I really have an actual relationship with outside of the podcast, but just knowing them through it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I even remember when that show that I went and saw, because I was in Phoenix and went and hung out while you were there, and then
Which was it, the Doug Stanhope?
No, you guys did a Guys We Fucked live podcast. It was probably like 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I remember I like snuck in and said hey in the green room real quick before, and you would like put me on the list so I could just go hang, because I was in Arizona with my grandparents and just wanted to see what you guys were doing.
We did a podcast? We didn't do
No, it was like the live show. It was you both did your stand-up.
Okay.
You had people come on stage, and you would like have them talk about someone who wronged them, and then you would call that person.
Prank call, yeah.
Yeah, and I just kind of, I was watching just from like how you put something together different. And then most importantly, when that show ended and those lines of people were out there and you were talking to everyone, it was very interesting to see, and I thought that it's impressive that you guys operate like that.
It's things I learned from Justin Bieber and Dane Cook. I mean, I like there's I don't know, it's a very like there's so many examples and it's just like that's why I love autobiographies or biographies and celebrities, because a lot of times I'm just like picking and choosing things that I liked or that I inspired me in people's lives or that I thought were good moves, and then you kind of just tag on your own spin on these things. And those are things that I loved, and I think part of the reason that both of those guys are really successful is because like you have to have that interaction with the fan base. It's very important.
Yeah, if you don't give them any respect, they're not going to care about you down the road.
Especially with the kind of content we're creating. It's so personal.
Yeah, no, it's extremely personal. And you ended up, so you had the podcast going, then you wrote a book, Fucked, Being Sexually Explorative and Self-Confident in a World That's Screwed. What did you want to get out of that book, and how were you going to make that different than your podcast?
It's interesting because people had been asking us to write a book for a long time, and we didn't feel ready until 2017. We didn't feel like we had enough knowledge to actually put in a book, and we needed to do the podcast longer to kind of collect our feelings about it. And we sat down with an editor at HarperCollins who had honestly been chasing us for years, since she was like a baby in like baby book publishing, and then she kind of grew up and had a bigger role at Harper One, and that was great. And she was the right person to do the book with. And we sat down and we made this big outline of what the book was going to be, and all these charts and facts and you know, pieces of emotion. And then Christine and we didn't want to write it together because me and Christine have very different thoughts, and also like I can't imagine how aggravating it would be to be like, we think this, like, you know, we have different thoughts, and also like when I write, I need to write alone. I can't be like, I wasn't gonna write a good piece of a book side by side with Christina, like we're like the Bobbsey twins.
Yeah, does that annoy you when people just automatically lump you two in a category?
Very much so. It's one of my hugest pet peeves. Because like kind of the foundation of my personality is being an individual. And so like it's the worst thing you could do.
Everything your way, the right way, and then people are like, "Oh, you're a team." They're like, "Oh."
And we are a team, but we're the odd couple. The only thing we have in common is our sense of humor. Everything else is complete.
Well, which is why your show,
opposites.
It's why your show works so well, because you're dynamic.
Yeah,
you have similar point of view, but very different, and it's why your conversation flows in such a natural manner. Yeah,
and so it's just so aggravating, and like people don't call us like the guys we fucked girls, which is like, I mean, that's me on my freaking tombstone.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and like people will just try to like kind of like people feel like we're interchangeable. Like if one of us cancels on a show, the other one of us is like 100% getting a text within 5 minutes, and it's aggravating. But anyway, so the book, and then we both took home our assignments. Like we broke down the outline, we took home our assignments separately, and without talking to each other, we just were like decided to write completely different things than we had discussed and agreed upon. And thank God they were two totally different pieces that worked well together. But it is like Christine and I have been working together so long that we do have this unspoken twin language. Like even on stage, we can just look at each other and know exactly what we need to do next, or cut this segment short, or like move on or whatever. Like we know we can complete each other's sentences. It's very, at this point, it's pretty easy. So I ended up writing a lot about self-confidence, and she ended up writing a lot about like sexuality and parts of sex and anal sex and and sex parties and stuff like that. All of those things that I have done, but I just find to be less interesting.
And what was your take more about?
Self-confidence. Because like to me, like what I took away from the podcast is that the main issue in people's lives is their lack of self-confidence and the shame that they're carrying around with them. And like that, and it's like when you think like, what am I an expert in? What am I qualified to write about? I'm not an expert comedian. I'm not even an expert podcaster. I'm like a groundbreaking podcaster, but like not an expert. I don't know. I'm still learning day by day. But what I do feel like the one thing that I am an expert in is like self-confidence. Like that's the only thing I've ever felt like an expert in, and also not carrying around shame. So that's what I wrote about, because I was like, this is one thing that I feel like I really can share that will make your life better. And I can't imagine, like, life is hard with self-confidence. I cannot imagine walking around not having it. It really, to me, like, just opened my eyes to kind of, like, every negative interaction I've ever had. I'm like, oh, this is so much, like, I really rarely get mad anymore because I just know, I'm like, this isn't about me. This is, I mean, unless I directly do something to you.
Yeah.
And it's helped me to be able to to figure out situations, even with fans getting angry or just so many things. It's just like life is so much easier once you realize that.
Yeah, is there a secret? Like, do you meditate? Do you just
No,
look in your life?
just knowing
is it
that.
Just knowing it. It's just a simple.
That's it. It's just like, you know, it's like an aha moment. There's like a couple, like, just little, like, lines that I have running around my head. And I'm like, oh, that's all I really needed. Like, you don't need it's not like a big thing. I don't know. I didn't need to read a lot of books. Like, I am in therapy, but I've only been in therapy for like a year. And that's honestly more dealing with being in the public eye is why I went in. And also secondhand trauma from just getting an inbox full of the most terrible, like, sexual assault emails that would, like, keep me up at night. So that's mostly what the therapy is for.
Do they still keep you up at night, or have you kind of learned to just...
I had to stop reading them a lot. We have an associate producer who will go through it now. I can't read everyone. I just couldn't. I was
It's
ruining my own
unbelievable
life.
how people out of nowhere just want to throw anger at people.
And then I also have a lot of it's not survivor's guilt, but it's like not being sexual assaulted guilt. And so, because it seems like so many people, you know, I have guilt, and I have guilt from, like, having a nice childhood. It's like, yeah, and I just didn't realize that most people, like, I would say many more people had a bad childhood than had a good childhood. And so I feel like guilty about that. And then reading this stuff on top of it, it was just too much. And there's a way to help without torturing yourself. And, you know, realizing it's just luck of the draw. It's like, it's not productive for me to sit and feel bad about that. And that's, like, kind of a pity party that no one invited me to anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of goes to your mindset of, like, I don't remember what you said, like, dilly-dally around. Like,
yeah,
you just...
my time could be used more productively,
yeah,
exactly.
as soon as you just look, glance, go, heh, and then it's...
Yes, it sucks. Yes, it's not fair. Life is not fair. The cards are not dealt out equally. And let's move on. And with this, how can I use, like, the fact that I am a pretty, like, functioning in a pretty good way emotionally, and use that for good, instead of being like, why wasn't I molested? You know, no one wants to hear that. No one wants to see that one woman show.
Poor girl. How...
Yes, Corinne, never molested. Like, no one wants to see that.
We live
No
in
one's
a
interested.
society where you can feel guilt for that. That's unbelievable.
So, yeah.
I also want to talk about an article you wrote that I found very interesting, having been single for most of my life.
The Glamour one?
The Glamour magazine one. Can everyone calm down about being single? Please. Why do you think? Where does that stigma come from? And are we ever going to get rid of it? That being single is not worse than being in a relationship. It's just different. I'm using your words from that.
I was like, that's so true. And then I was like, oh, yeah, because it's in the article.
Yeah, like, I'm just forming these amazing insights through my own. No, I pulled it from what you said.
Well, and also, yeah, I think that was also something that I had discussed with the editor, to credit the editor at Glamour. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where the stigma comes from. Like, you know, there's like a fear. All movies, it's like all about romance, about finding the one, about ending up with someone, about this romantic stories always end with finding someone who gets you and, you know, accepts your flaws, and, like, that person can be you. That person can be multiple people. That person can be your dog. That person can be Spring Breakers the movie. That's a personal one. And
I actually wrote that quote down. I'll read the quote because you ended the article with it. You were talking about how you can enjoy being single, and you go, I reflect on that time I went to see Spring Breakers alone on a Friday night. It was great. Both my elbows had armrests.
Yeah. And I remember that. That just, like, there's nothing really about relationships in that movie. It's just about, like, a lot of, like, the kind of, like, the essence of that movie is freedom to be a young woman, to have fun, to drink and wear a bikini and not be a mess, but also not feel terrible about it. And so it was just really nice. I remember that night quite vividly. But yeah, and I go to, like, especially as a comedian, I think we all do this. Like, there's a lot of time that you're killing between shows. You're going to a lot of restaurants alone, and, like, people do look at you weird, and they do look at you. And I even do it sometimes. You'll see, like, you know, an old man alone at a diner, and you'll be like, oh, he must miss his wife. And, like, you know, maybe he killed his wife. We don't know. You know, we don't know. I'm making up a story. Maybe this guy loves this. Maybe this is the best part of his day. Maybe his wife's at home, and this is the hour he gets to get away from him. I don't know the story.
You can't form
Yeah.
Which is the antithesis of another situation where an old lady was sitting by herself eating dinner, and a young guy went up to her and like decided to eat with her, and it turned out she had just lost her husband, and then he started eating with her like every week for like, and it was like this beautiful social media
And that's
story.
the story that I think most people
Like,
think of and
it's
want to
like-
hear.
Exactly.
Because they have such a fear of being alone. And I don't, because like in retrospect, the loneliest I've ever felt in my life were definitely times when I was with someone who like I just didn't relate to anymore, or I didn't feel like they were giving me what I need. Like the loneliness that you feel when you are at the end of a relationship that is not working, to me, is far more difficult to deal with than actually being alone in your apartment with your thoughts. But again, that's because I like me. So
You gotta like yourself.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
like I guess if you don't like you, that could be really
Being with that person
terrible.
all the time
Yeah.
is
Yeah. And like I have obsessive compulsive disorder, so it's not like it's like a party in my head. Like there's still it's still a nightmare up there, but it's not directed at like hatred directed at me. It's just like obsessing over things a little more, you know.
Yeah.
I definitely like obsessing over perfection. I have to be careful about that because it's not possible.
Yeah, no, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And are you dating anyone at the time?
Yeah. Yeah,
How long
yeah,
is that
yeah.
been going on?
I mean, like officially, it's like what month is it? Like about like 4.5 months. But it's someone I met, went on a first date with in August of last year, and he was just in LA for a while, and so he just like kind of like was very consistent. I actually didn't even know like what was going on, because he was like, do you want to meet up? Like he said, like, do you want to meet up? Like not a date. And there's a couple reasons why I was like, okay. Like he seemed like a cool person anyway, and we had been chatting for a while, so I met up with him, which is very unlike me, because like I need a friend at this point. Like I need a hole in my head. I try to skim friends. Like
Yeah.
but this person just like I really got along with him. He really seemed cool. So but then I realized that just because he's like a cool person with a cool job, cool people with cool jobs can feel insecure too. So he just had set it up as not a date, so that like
It was
it
setting
like,
his expectations.
yeah, it just made it easier for him. So if I didn't like him, then it's a security blanket. So which I understand a lot more clearly now. But it was very confusing in the beginning, because like, we just kept hanging out, and like it took like till date 3 to kiss me, and I was like, I don't know, like
Oh, really? 3 days for a kiss?
yeah, like I'm like fine with being friends with this person, because he's just really, really shy. And I was working on my feminine energy with my therapist at the time, so I couldn't kiss him, because it would have thrown off the whole thing.
Oh.
And
So you were just sitting there wanting to like...
I honestly, I didn't even care either way. I was just like, I just need to know, so I know what energy to give back, because I wasn't going to take it as like a personal rejection, but I have no interest in trying to convince someone who is not sexually attracted to me to kiss me. Like that, I need to know from you. I'm not trying to win anyone over. Like you
Yeah,
you either really like me or you don't.
Or you don't. There's no...
I don't
getting around
I don't
that.
accept any in-betweens.
Yeah. You've dated comics before. Do you like dating? Do you think there's an advantage, a disadvantage as a comic dating a comic?
Yeah, I liked dating comics, but it's hard to say, because I mean, obviously, like
It works for some people.
it ended. None of them ended well, because those are all over. And this is really my first time in a long time dating someone who's not a comedian. He is in the entertainment business though, and most of it I think is better. There's no competition element, especially as a woman who is doing well. No comedians I dated were doing better than me, and guys really don't handle that well, honestly.
Yeah, it's like...
My ex for a long time did, because he walked into it knowing what he was getting into, but then when he didn't, get to X level at a certain point, I think he grew frustrated, and not necessarily at me, but I would get something, and then it would immediately turn into like, well, why didn't I get it? And I'm like, well, I've been doing this longer, and I've also been working harder.
Yeah, and why? And
Sorry.
at what point does that like...
Yeah.
Is that a good, healthy way to build a relationship with
No,
someone?
and of course not. And women so often are made to feel bad, or like to hide our achievements, to lift the men in our lives up, and like bullshit. And these are like a couple of these like revelations or things I've had very recently. And I'm very obsessed with women in business right now. Because it's like, you can say like the patriarchy is keeping us down with the wage gap. That's not what it is. We're keeping ourselves down by wasting energy, helping our husband, guy we like, boyfriend start a business. The amount of free time I've put into holding men's hands as they try to get something off the ground instead of working on myself is crazy. And I obviously still created my own little empire here, but like I'm even mad at myself for wasting as much time as I have on helping boyfriends achieve stuff, because it's that you're not going to get anything back on that. And also men are fully capable. If I'm capable, you're fully capable of doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I need you.
Yeah.
It's like, figure it out yourself.
And I really, with feminism, I really like to take a personal responsibility stance. And so it's not the patriarchy. We need to learn to stop doing that. And, it's a relationship. There should be something equal there. We don't have to offer these complimentary services. You're not the Holiday Inn. You don't need a warm cookie when you check in. Like, they should be happy to be there because you're you, and vice versa. Like, it's so frustrating. And also, we should have just the courage to, tackle our own dreams. Like, women have great ideas. You just have to have the confidence to do them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're wrapping up. We're getting to the end, and but you gave a TED talk about it, you and Christina,
About body.
And I thought it was super interesting, and I think it's interesting the way you guys approach feminism, because a lot of people it's very angry reaction and visceral, and it's off-putting to certain people, and you guys found a way to kind of really use your humor to kind of sell that package.
Right.
And
that's the main thing. We're like, what's missing from feminism? A sense of humor. A sense of humor about ourselves. If you can't make a joke about yourself and roast yourself a little bit, like, what do you do? That's how I start my stand-up comedy set, making fun of myself. Like, so you can be like, hey, I'm on this stage, but like, I'm a piece of shit just like you. That's relatable. Like, you can't, you can't take everything so seriously. And it's like, in my opinion, the most serious things that could use jokes to lighten them and to make them easier to talk about, to clear the air.
Yeah, no, it brings people in. How much of your audience is men, do you know?
It is pretty 50-50 as far as people who come out to our shows, very young, very female. But as far as the actual listenership demographics, it is a lot closer to 50-50.
That's unbelievable.
Than people would think.
You've clearly struck a chord in how to communicate something that a lot of people struggle to communicate. And it's like, it's a gradual process to shift people and to make a movement happen. And patience will, as much as you want to get visceral and angry, patience and humor goes a long way.
Yeah, and it's like, it's just like, I feel like we're all part of the movement. Like, we certainly we weren't like, we didn't come in with like an agenda.
Yeah.
I'm falling over.
Are you falling over?
But I'm trying to not fall too far.
It's all good.
Yeah. We're about to wrap up. Deb, you've been a real trooper. Have you learned anything from this? Have you been taking a lot in? Because I know a lot of this is like foreign world to you.
I know. I was like, who do you usually have? You usually have comedians.
It's usually comics. We've had artistic directors, and we've had like, but it's usually stand-ups, and she's always learning something, which is great.
Well, no, you've made being female so much more acceptable.
Oh, God, that's very nice. Thank you.
Because we talk, it's unbelievable, because we talk a lot about how she has a troubled past and she's kind of felt less than for being a woman.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like, because I'm dealing a lot with people in their 20s or 30s, so to be 89, is that correct? I can only imagine what you've gone through, because it's still so bad for so many women. So,
and she has a hard time, I guess, fully understanding how much the movement is taking storm.
Yeah,
But when you're this old and life goes on, it's very hard to appreciate what the changes are.
Yeah. Well, and it's happening rapidly, and there's still so much infighting amongst women, and you're like,
I'm no surprise.
Yeah, you're like, just work together, please. Like, we could achieve so much. And a lot of it is like nitpicking. We're like, we generally have the same thing, like wants or goals, but social media lets you know every little thought in someone's head, which I don't think is a great idea.
Well,
yes.
it exploits feelings and
Yes.
in order to draw you into listening to somebody
Yes.
instead of you just yourself.
Yeah. And some thoughts are just meant for privacy.
Sometimes they're meant for you.
Yeah, inside head thoughts.
Yeah, but again, we're so glad to have you because to actually give proof of someone who's paving their own way, being funny, finding a way to kind of open doors for women and give them the ability to kind of be more self-confident in themselves. It's an unbelievable gift you're giving to the world.
Well, I mean, it's just like the most powerful tool. Once you stop caring what other people think, man, the world is your oyster, truly. So.
Wonder how that arrived at why is the world an oyster? Why isn't it a clam?
Well, it's because there's a pearl inside an oyster, right? Clams don't have, I believe that's why. Very simply. Yeah. Because there's something real good in there. Like when you peel back the crust, which I think is, yeah. That's that.
Yeah. So what's next? Any other projects you're working on? Big
Yeah.
things?
I mean, we're working towards, normal goals that you would think the comedians would do. And then personally, I'm just trying to create more of my own stuff.
Normal goals?
Like normal comedy goals. So, like TV stuff, specials, things like that. The things that you would want to get. Because I'm approaching a decade into stand-up comedy.
Is that a heavy place to be?
It's not. Comedy is one of those things that takes a really, really long time. So I think maybe not until you're 8 are people even really taking you seriously as a comedian. So even though it feels like, a decade in a business, you're still a pretty new comic at 10 years in. But by year 8, 9, you should kind of have crafted what they call your voice. So your perspective, what people go to hear you joke about. And so that's kind of what I'm just trying to hone in on now. And yeah. And then just do a lot more writing, like go back and use my BFA in directing. I still want to do all that stuff. I just took a little bit of a side road.
No, life has so much possibilities.
Yeah, follow it. So.
Yeah, has it been inspiring to you, Dev?
I'm very pleased to be here and hear
Thank you. I was so excited I was like, you were the sell on the reason I came into the podcast. Yeah. Well, because I think older women's voices are just not highlighted enough, and we're so obsessed with hearing like young people's voices, but it's like I'd much rather hear someone who's lived a life of experience, like who has had all these experiences, because you're going to learn a lot from their personal history. So.
And it echoes so much of what your own life has been like.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I want to talk to you more, but
Thank
yeah.
you.
And lucky for you, the last segment
thank
we're
you.
going to do, because Dev has so much wisdom touching on.
Oh, great.
You have a choice here.
Okay.
If you have, think of like a therapy session. If you have something you have a question about in your life, if you don't have one of those, we have like a bowl of questions that you can draw from.
Okay.
And you can ask Dev, and Dev.
Well, I did see these. I didn't want to look at it. Well, I'll ask one of these, and then I may ask a follow-up.
Yeah, you can.
Because I need
This is your chance to take.
You can take one and reject it and follow it up.
Okay.
There's a lot of freedom here.
I don't. Yeah. Let's see. A lot of these aren't relevant because they have to do with like not knowing what you're doing with your life.
Yeah, I know. They were, I guess, more like.
Well, here, this is a question that I get asked a lot, and I certainly don't know the answer to. Do you ever feel like when did you feel like an adult, or did you ever feel like an adult? Because I'm 33 and I don't feel like an adult.
You don't have to.
Do you feel like one now though at 89?
Superannuated.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like, people are like, when do you? I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I do adult things, but I guess I felt the most adult when I adopted a dog, because then I had to take care of another living creature.
You were responsible.
Yeah, and then other than that, nah. But I'm like, I don't even. What does an adult feel like? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, this one I think is good for. How do I keep myself from getting in my own way?
Just don't pick on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that.
Just say yes to what happens, and then try to think why. Why did that happen? Why did I feel that way? If you start with the why, it's more accepting than dismissing and criticizing.
Just why, and taking, and it's also more like learn, like what you can learn from it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think, I wish I could prepared something because I'm sure I have questions.
Take your time.
I can give you my phone number and my email address.
I know.
She's always here for you.
Oh, and then I guess one that I think is there. I find so often because this is I have more trouble. I don't have trouble giving myself advice, but sometimes I have trouble giving others advice, and that's such a big part of what I do. So like if I find that a lot of people have like a singular experience most times in childhood or early adulthood that they can't get past. Do you still have something like that in your life? And like, how do you work through it? Or if it's not still present, like how did you get through it?
Some things you don't get through at all. You just accept that.
And is it a day-to-day, like waking up and kind of...
No, because it doesn't carry that much of a daily weight.
Okay. But just sometimes it will arise in your mind
and
passes?
yeah.
Okay.
And you don't criticize yourself for the experience. Mm-hmm. It's the self-criticism that makes life so tough.
Have you ever gone to like formal therapy? Because I know that's more of a new...
Much.
Yeah, you have? Okay. It's interesting because I feel like a lot of like parents of people our age kind of like just didn't go and almost thought it was weird unless they had experienced some like specific traumatic event. But like the kind of like maintenance therapy, people don't.
Yeah.
Like people in their 60s like are like, nah.
Nah, it's like even I kind of know I need therapy.
What is maintenance therapy?
I think just finding a healthy way to like talk out your feelings so that they don't bubble up into something larger. Even like small resentments against, family or coworkers. Like managing feelings as they come up the same way as you wouldn't like let yourself gain 100 pounds. Instead, you would just go to the gym every day. And maybe like a little extra if you ate a ton of cupcakes over Christmas or something. I think we neglect the mental health care a lot because you can't see it. The way it manifests itself is kind of only seen through your actions and emotions, not in the mirror. And the mirror is like an easier fix kind of, because it's less of a who you are. It's just what you look like. That's what I think. Yeah.
Well, a long life with psychotherapy for punctuating much of it is a way of just being able to speak and be heard and to listen so that you work things through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And not burden your friends and family. Because I think a lot of people mistake their
That's what I do.
Significant other. Yeah.
I don't overbear it, but it happens.
Yeah, because like so how long have you been married at this?
I've been married over 50 years.
And were there ever times when you felt you were using your spouse as a therapist or a life coach when you shouldn't? You were always really good about those boundaries?
I don't even know if there are boundaries.
No. So does you tell him everything?
No, sometimes you don't have to talk.
Uh-huh. Okay. Because that's another mistake that I feel like I've certainly made, and people just like giving all your emotions, and a lot of them tend to be negative, and all your complaints to a partner instead of saving some for a professional or a friend or your mom or just someone else in your life.
It isn't really a matter of saving. It's a matter of knowing.
And
also, if the two of you have had children and raised them together, it opens up the world in such a different way that if you haven't had that, then you're asking questions that you've been asking all along.
Okay. How did your relationship change with your husband when you had kids?
There's a lot I don't know now. Mm-hmm. So it had to change. But then that gets dissolved in the past. Did you know that so much gets dissolved in the past?
Meaning like it's not significant anymore, or that you just don't think about it anymore?
You don't.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay.
So how do you handle losing that control of that memory, I guess?
I don't even know if you thought you had control.
Yeah.
I guess that's the takeaway. You don't always have control.
Yeah, and just like it's allowing or just like letting it go.
Yeah, letting it go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I take away from you the most is that ability to kind of. Why are you worried about that? That's stupid. You got an audition, you just do it. Don't care about the outcome. And
Yeah, learning to let go is.
learning to let go.
It's also a song on Kesha's new album, but it's.
If only we could have ended on an Alanis Morissette note. But we got Kesha to end out the day.
But I also think that if you've gone through raising kids together, and then whatever happens in life goes on, there's something substantial that's there. You're not. It makes a big difference when you're not alone.
Yeah, because I guess my follow up to that is like I've never wanted to have kids. I want to open a senior citizen home for dogs. This is a long story, but like a surrender senior center. Okay, anyway, but that's another thing for another podcast. But I do definitely want, whether I get married or not, to have like a long-term partner. And it's like, is there a piece? Is there a piece that you're missing if you don't have kids, or is it just kind of another choice to make? And there's other ground to be dug up, I guess, maybe in that relationship. I guess you would only know the answer to the life that you've lived, but.
That's it, and that's quite a bit.
Yeah, I know, because I mean, some people seem like so shocked, like at not wanting to have kids, and I don't know. I just feel like that's not like what I was. I feel like my purpose is not that. I just don't think it is.
It doesn't have to feel like your purpose. It's just if it's a wish.
Oh yeah, or something I would like,
and if
or want,
and if it's shared.
Yeah, with the part, exactly, yeah. Because I've weeded out a lot of people who most men do want to have kids. Turns out, because it's easier for them.
Is that what it is?
I think
I don't know.
It's easier for them.
Yeah, I think the mom's job is a little tougher, I would think, but I don't know.
It's different.
It's different, yeah.
But then you have kids and you get flowers for Mother's Day. Isn't that something?
And then it's all worth it.
And then it's all worth it for those flowers you get.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, Corinne, thank you so much
you.
for
Thank
coming
you.
by.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the crew,
Yeah,
Max, Lori, Bill, Sung-hee.
Much bigger production than certainly my podcast and any podcast.
We do it up big. We got
I love
Twizzlers.
it. Good
We got
for
cameras.
you.
We got,
Good for you.
we're trying to, elevate the show and elevate Dev and elevate everything.
I love it.
It's a part of it.
And elevate yourself.
Elevate
Can't
myself.
forget that.
Yeah. That's a byproduct, but obviously that's part of it.
It's not a bad.
I know.
It's just maybe it's just a product.
Exactly. I was like, good thing you're here because.
Yeah, but you've given me. I've learned so much from you. I'm dating somebody. Life seems good. I'm in control of my own path, and a lot of it is the wisdom that she shares with me. So I also want people who come on the show to kind of get a sense of that. But you just kind of seem to have all your eggs in a basket, or eggs, whatever that saying
Ducks
is.
in a row.
Ducks in a row.
Think, yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah, no, I know, but I also have I have confidence in myself, and that the things I haven't figured out, I know that I will be able to figure out. That's what it's not like I'm so together.
No, totally. I get it, and I love it, and I think people can take that away. So thank everyone else for tuning in. Remember, check us out on iTunes if you haven't already. Download, rate, review. You can also check us out on Himalaya, which is an amazing podcasting platform. And I guess until next time, gang, remember, stay happy, stay funny.
And stay alive.
I love that. Yay!
Amen. Thanks again, Corinne.